Good evening. In this broadcast, the program time. First, briefly about a few of the topics in this edition. In Primoria, a general coal miners' strike has begun. Alexis Skovets arrives in Mozdok tomorrow in Chechnya. On site, a meeting of the State Commission to restore the economy of the Republic is to be held. Today, training of combat ships of the Northern Fleet was completed. The President of Uzbekistan supports the presence of the United States in the Central Asian region. Mass disorders were created by a group of anarchists in the Greek capital. The Jurassic Period Park from cinema screens comes to life, a project undertaken by Chinese scientists. And so the top news of the day was the beginning of a general strike of coal workers of Primoria, the protest action of the 5 coal mining companies of the city Partizansk demanding an urgent liquidation by government of a 4-month salary delay, was joined today by the Geological Enrichment Factory, the auto plant and the railway. The Speaker of the Primorian Rim Duma, Igor Lebedinets, confirmed the intention of local deputies to urge labor collectives of the Trans-Siberian route and seaports to join the strike. Since morning, all 14 mines of the Primoria area shut down. Their collectives ceased mining and loading of coal for consumers who owe the miners of the Rim already 160 billion rubles, of them 90 billion towards salaries. The strikers have no political demands, merely economic ones, to pay out what they've earned, at least for the 3 winter months. Incidentally, the mines of the city of Partizansk closed down because of non-payment back in March. 28 geological employees, in sign of protest, declared a hunger strike under the ground surface. Today, only 11 remain. The rest have been hospitalized. Today, they were joined in the hunger strike by 5 geological workers of the mine Urgalskaya in the Khabarovsk Rim. Although Rosugol, that is Russian coal company, disbursed to the miners 5 billion rubles for the salary, that's only a drop in the bucket. Although the Rim administration offered humanitarian aid from Vietnam to the miners. The strike of the miners of Primoria was caused by purely local reasons and has no chance of escalating into a nationwide strike. This Interfax was told today by the first deputy chairman of the Independent Union of Miners of Russia, Edward Kinsler. According to him, social pressure in the Rim is escalated by the local administration. 17 billion rubles from the federal budget, which never reached the Primorian miners, were discovered during an inquiry into the financial business operations of the joint stock company Primorsk Coal. The audit was conducted by the Department of the Federal Accounting in the Primorian region. As a correspondent of Vitor Tas was told today in the Rim prosecutor's office, the diverted funds circled about in various commercial entities. The economics minister of Russia, Yevgeny Yasin, stated that the strike of the miners, which began in Primoria, is not connected with non-payments from the state budget, but exclusively with the non-payments by consumers of their products. Today, in an interview to Interfax, the minister noted that the cabinet will exert pressure on coal consumers in order to resolve the delinquency in payments. The Minister of Finances, Vladimir Panskov, on his part, confirmed that the funds allocated for the miners from the budget were dispersed in their full amount. Despite the strike in Primoria, today coal mining was resumed in Russia's largest Borodinsk coal vault, whose employees were on strike because of lengthy salary withholdings. The administration of the company undertook to settle the debt for January and February by the 19th of April. The first vice premier of the government of Russia, Alexis Skovets, arrived today in Chechnya. Tomorrow, in Grozny, he will chair the on-site meeting of the State Commission on the Restoration of the Economy of the Chechen Republic. The on-site meeting of the State Commission on the Restoration of the Economy of Chechnya is now in its 2nd day in Grozny. Among the delegation are heads of 29 ministries and departments which, on-site, intend to resolve the entire complex of social and economic issues. Among accomplishments of the local administration, we note the creation of several markets where prices are lower than in Moscow, the opening of 11 facilities for health care, the opening of 4 commuter bus routes. However, as previously, difficulties arise with electricity, heating, and water supply. These problems, together with construction and the restoration of residential homes, remain in the center of attention of the members of the State Commission. Considering the fact that many residents are returning to their homes and the immigration services have received more than 9,000 applications to restore housing, it's planned to increase construction tempos. In the opinion of the deputy head of the Department of Federal Organs of Rural and Chechnya, Vladimir Zorin, to restore Grozny, 4 to 5 years will be needed, although not everyone shares such an optimistic view. No matter what, one of the priority questions, which will be discussed tomorrow by the first first deputy chairman of the government of Russia, Alexei Skovets, with members of the commission and representatives of the local organs of rule, this work of clearing the rubble from the city is the task of the departments in charge of restoring life-sustaining services. The director of the Federal Service of Counterintelligence, Sergei Stepashin, feels that the basic combat operation in Chechnya has been completed and the Dudayev army as such no longer exists. This he said today to journalists upon his arrival in the Chechen capital. Today, according to sources from within the Ministry of Defense, the military situation in Chechnya was described as relatively calm. At the same time, to the city of Grozny, whose name on the maps has a footnote, former, 2/3 of the refugees have returned. However, the word former will not soon vanish from the lexicon of cartographers. In the city, restorational work is underway with the aid of builder contractors. Operating actively are food distribution points. Partially renewed is water feed to residential homes. Possibly soon after cosmetic repair, the northern airport will begin to receive civilian airplanes. At the same time, according to the military sources, the increase of military activity is observed near the populated points Ochkoy Martan and Samashki, but probably the situation in this region will be resolved peacefully. Arriving in Grozny today, the director of the FSK, Sergei Stepashin, especially for the program time, commented, "Just as was predicted, the basic combat operation has been completed. The Dudayev army, or rather the Maskadov army, no longer exists today. Now there are three main problems which have to be solved here. The first is to restore the economy and the city. People have begun to return. It was predicted they wouldn't, but they are returning and they're continuing to come and will live, work here, that is, Russian citizens. The second thing is the restoration of the infrastructure, not just the economic one, but the political one as well. That is, resolving problems of local self-rule and organs of power. This is very important because there is some disorder underway here. And the third is to decide the problem regarding those who have brought the Chechen Republic into this state today. There have been criminal cases launched, and there are criminals with whom we will have to deal. Please tell us the situation around Ochkoy Martan and Samashki. How will it develop in the near future, and what can we expect? I think that by the end of April there will be peace there. Meanwhile, the residents of Ochkoy Martan decided to recognize on their territory the authority of the Committee of National Rebirth of Chechnya, Iturtas reports. As was learned today in Grozny, on last Wednesday's People's Assembly of Thousands, it was decided that the armed Dudayev supporters would leave the village and law and order would be ensured there by organs of local self-rule. The Ochkoy Martan residents approached the command of the federal forces in Chechnya with the request to cease artillery firing and aviation attacks. The scandal in the Russian parliament when the deputy Nikolai Lysenko deprecated the state flag of Ukraine was repeated today in the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine. The deputies, Yuri Tima and Oleg Vitovich, also couldn't resist the temptation to demonstrate behavior unfit for parliament and tore up the state flag of the Russian Federation. The Speaker of the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine asked the Prosecutor General's office to give a legal assessment of the deputies' actions. Pursuant to legislation, they could face imprisonment for up to 2 years. I'll remind you that their Russian vis-a-vis Nikolai Lysenko got off lighter yesterday. He was forbidden to speak in the State Duma until the end of April. However, the Ukrainian parliament today declared him a persona non grata, and now entry into that country for Lysenko is prohibited. Despite the incidents in the parliaments of Russia and Ukraine, both countries should strive toward cooperation. This is the opinion of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Gennady Udavenko. Commenting to journalists on the incident in Ukrainian parliament, the minister called this action undignified. At the same time, Udavenko called the review of the Crimean issue within Russian parliament to a certain degree interference in the internal affairs of Ukraine. According to the minister, Ukraine understands that there are Russian interests in Crimea and therefore it is in constant dialogue with Russia. Today, the Supreme Soviet of Crimea approached the Ukrainian parliament with a legislative initiative to place a veto on Leonid Kuchma's decree on the resubordination of the Crimean government. A few days ago, this request had been sent to Kiev, but in the form of an address, and received no response. But a legislative initiative absolutely must be examined by the Ukrainian parliament. The Supreme Soviet also adopted a statement to the heads of the states, parliaments, and international organizations in which it clarifies its position in the dispute with Ukraine. The question of a constitutional commission was reviewed. Its task would be to analyze documents adopted by the Ukrainian parliament and the president on Crimea. The Supreme Soviet instructed the speaker, Sergei Tsakov, to formulate a delegation for a trip to Moscow on the invitation of the State Duma of the Russian Federation. Public Russian television is still a source of turmoil for many politicians. As was already reported, Wednesday, the lower chamber of parliament adopted immediately in the second and third readings a law on a special manner for privatization of state television and radio, which specifically intends to deprive Ostankino and the Public Russian television of their broadcasting licenses, and on top of that, Public Russian television of its budgetary financing. This was what was said in this regard in an interview to the program Time by the General Director of Public Russian Television, Sergei Blagovoy. Respected television viewers, as you probably all know, yesterday the State Duma in the third reading adopted a law which essentially contradicts the decree of the President on the creation of a Public Russian television station. I don't want to speak of how this happened. I wasn't present at the Duma. Others can talk about that. I wish to speak of the essence of what has happened. All of this evokes bewilderment, mildly speaking, and this is why, during the first days which have passed since the creation of Public Russian television, we've proven that we have not violated a single promise that we made. We said that there would be no advertising which irritates people, and there is none. We said we would broaden the field of public accord and not diminish it, and that is so. We said that television viewers will see everything to which they are accustomed, that which they like and what they don't want to lose, and you see for yourselves that it is so. We have had no unnecessary revolution for the sake of revolution. We said that we wanted to rekindle respect for the Russian army, and everyone sees that it is so, and it is also happening. We said, finally, that on our screens we would present various points of view, and all those who saw the speech of our great compatriot Alexander Isaievich Solzhenitsyn could be convinced that it is so, and I would like to emphasize that this program was requested by us, although there are many harsh words said against us. Moreover, in the next days, Public Russian television will begin airing films produced by Alexander Nevzorov, and as you know, this is a person who is of exceptional harshness and strictness in his views. In a word, I could probably continue to list many more points and positions, but I would like to again emphasize that we have prepared a general agreement with the television company Ostankino, in which, incidentally, all contentious issues are removed. They are all regarding our mutual relations. And finally, here's one more thing. The adoption of this law won't add any money to the till. Our overall expenditures over this year are approaching 1 trillion rubles. And as it became clear during our consultations with the chairman of the government of Russia, all of these expenditures in this year will fall not on the state portion of stockholders' shoulders. That means, respected viewers, in the event that this law does take force, this trillion will be taken from your pockets. I sincerely speaking have been attempting to understand who needs all of this. Don't we have any other problems, daily problems, the resolution of which is awaited by all of Russia and all of you? I address the respected Duma deputies, the respected members of the Federative Council, and foremost to you, our dear viewers, for whose sake all of this is happening in essence. I think that the time has come to receive a comprehensive answer to the questions why, how, and for whom, and by whom was all this accomplished. I can't find an answer to these questions for now, but maybe you will find them. I thank you for your attention. And here's the opinion of the Deputy of the State Duma, Alexander Nevzorov. Presumably, the attack on Public Russian television, which we see, is decadent and will lead to nothing, but it is extremely indicative of what is occurring in Russia today. It's clear that Russian public television, by its mere creation, by offering employment to people who for a long time were in a certain dissonance with public opinion, Russian public television is dangerous for those forces which wish, through monopoly, through harshness and shamelessness, to preach everything which is anti-state. The fact that public Russian television is offering jobs, as far as I know, not just to me, but as well to many people who think completely differently than the leadership of the public Russian television station, possibly otherwise, this creates, for those anti-state forces, a dangerous precedent of their loss of opportunity to control broadcasting as indivisibly as they did previously. Also, public Russian television is unpleasant and dangerous because it's professional television, because it's people from all ends of the country, from everywhere, are recruiting and drawing in anyone who is capable of producing television programs. I presume that here we don't have to seek an answer at a long distance for whom these provocations are conducive. And in our dear and endlessly naive State Duma, for the Duma it's sufficient to say the word privatization, which is odious to many within the State Duma and probably to me as well, and Duma will immediately sign any document directed against privatization. And I presume that that Duma attack, which was instigated just recently, is the work of those same hands. I can't tell you precisely to what degree it was easy and natural for me to accept the offer of the directorship of public Russian television to work with them. They understand that I'm a complex person, and I understand the same about them. And yet, as a result of negotiations which lasted for a very long time, and not just dialogues, but hours and days of negotiations, and yet we reached a common denominator, and I may say that in my convictions and my conscience and in my views of my duty, I did not have to compromise. Honest television is always extremely dangerous for those who hate our homeland. Today, journalists of leading television companies, radio stations, newspapers, critics, writers, and musicians, in a word, everyone who cares for the fate of the new television channel, gathered together to discuss the situation which has developed around public Russian television, which hasn't yet celebrated 1 week since its birth. We need, as no one else in the world perhaps, a highly moral, cultured television which would enlighten the people, that is, those people who have a need of moral information. And I hope that the new television will follow that path. Therefore, I support it. Why must we preserve public Russian television? We have to, because if we don't want the communists to take power again, and if we don't want, again, that concentration camps should start to function and all that, which has not yet been completely dismantled, we must do everything so that this program, this fresh wind, which we have been sensing and seeing for just a few days, that it would continue. I think that, of course, this channel is unconditionally necessary. And why must we only see negative aspects? We must seek positive ones as well. Therefore, I think that eventually truth will prevail, and public Russian television will function and will constructively cooperate with separate individual companies and with Ostankina. The favorite story of my little daughter is called The Golden Key. Apart from a field of wonders, there is also a land of fools in that story. We've all gathered here now, and we're planting the good, the eternal, the beautiful. We're throwing golden coins and waiting for these marvelous trees to sprout up bearing gold coins. But we are in a land of fools. No one hears us. These coins will be dug up and no trees will grow because they're located where there is Basil the cat, the cunning fox, the bulldogs, and there are many naive Pinocchios who've gathered here. I'm horrified that we are speaking empty words and nothing is growing in this field of wonders. May God grant that if the coin which I'm tossing now will bear at least some small sprout. I am for public Russian television. I'd very much wish that the coin will grow, but I don't believe it. Not everyone was so pessimistic as Anatoly Pristav. Golovkin. Incidentally, he is the chairman of the Presidential Clemency Commission. We continue to believe in the common sense of our statesmen because Russia can't afford 2 state television stations. Or else, again, instead of films and broadcasts, we will see MMM mascots on the backdrop of the Russian house Serenga, which will offer us, and in fact, in the best scenario, will enable us to buy only 1 Snickers candy bar. On this day, 50 years ago, the troops of the Third Belarusian Front began their last decisive storming of Königsberg. And for us and for the Germans, this clash had a special historical sense. Founded as a fortress in the year 1255, Königsberg, during the course of several centuries, was the main citadel of Prussian militarism. In its history, for almost 700 years, in a wondrous way, the insatiable Germanic aggressiveness intertwined with the grandeur of the German spirit. From here, ironclad knights several times launched bloody assaults on their neighboring Slav and Baltic lands. Born here in Königsberg and creating his mammoth labor was the progenitor of German classical philosophy, Immanuel Kant. And now, over his grave, boiled one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. During 6 centuries, Königsberg was turned into an inaccessible fortress. In order to get through to the main citadel, one had to pass 4 defensive belts consisting of continuous chains of mounds, trenches, and old forts with walls of several meters in thickness. Even the homes within the city were adapted for lengthy defense purposes, basements with concrete chambers. Many streets were mined. Especially complicating these blitzes were the abundant underground channels which were used for maneuvers and unexpected attacks by the adversary. Overall, the siege of Königsberg continued for almost 4 months. Tens of thousands of our soldiers laid down their heads in this fiery, stony hell. The last ardent storm lasted only 3 days and ended on the 9th of April with a full defeat and capitulation of the 100,000-strong German garrison. To commemorate that victory, a special medal was instituted for the taking of Königsberg. Apart from it, throughout the entire war, only 3 such awards were instituted for the taking of Budapest, Vienna, and Berlin. But Berlin and Vienna were still ahead. A little more than a month remains before the celebration of the Victory Day. Today it became learned that in the framework of the celebration in Moscow, 100 various functions will be held. At today's press conference in the Mayoralty, the discussion regarded preparations for the celebration of the 50th anniversary victory. The Muscovite authorities were preparing in 2 directions. First of all, to provide veterans with promised benefits. On the other hand, to finish construction. With the veterans, it seems everything is normal. 80% have already received apartments, and with the construction, however, frozen in the former life, the complex on Poklonny Hill was defrosted quickly. Money isn't being spared, but 33 days remains. Many feel the builders just won't manage. The mayor of the city left there at 12:30 in the morning a day and a half ago. He conducted a meeting and resolved all questions. But in any case, the construction will be finished. This is about Poklonny Hill, but the project on Manier Square will not be covered, but a more decent barrier will be set up. In the parade on Red Square, there will be 4,000 Muscovites, 820 veterans from Russia, and 420 from the republics of the CIS. Participants of the parade were recommended by the Veterans Council. Special attention was paid to the condition of health. The mere list of festive functions takes up 27 pages in fine print, and this will cost, according to the most modest approximate calculations, 500 billion rubles. Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia today welcomed the planned visit of the chairman of the People's Republic of China, Chen Zemin, to Moscow for the festive functions on the occasion of celebrating the 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Participating in the functions in Moscow participation in functions in Moscow was confirmed by heads of 27 countries, 27 out of 56 countries and international organizations invited to the celebrations. The question of the non-confidence vote into the government of Russia is planned to be discussed in the Duma the 12th of April. Intertas reports such a decision was made in the evening by the Duma Council, which reviewed the petitions of 102 deputies of the lower chamber who raised the question of non-confidence. To table the question, according to regulations, at least 90 votes are necessary. Meanwhile, the government at its regular session today was occupied with current issues. The exhibit of the accomplishments of domestic industry, spread out in one of the halls of the government building, greeted surprised members of the Cabinet of Ministers meeting. The thing is that the Committee on Higher Education, which, as is known, in the budget is included in the meager figures of the social bloc, decided to prove visual arguments that it's not squandering budget funding. Innovative activities of the higher education institution embraces all directions of domestic industry and evidently created an appropriate impression on the Prime Minister. Victor Chernomyrdin instructed that the exhibit not be dismantled and that directors of companies be invited to attend it, who here can find that which they seek far beyond the country's borders. As a result, the proposals submitted in the government on developing a system of secondary and post-secondary professional education were introduced favorably. According to the committee, higher academic institutions unite 6 million people, and for the first time in 15 years, interest toward higher education has risen. Despite the brain drain, it was possible to preserve the level of the pedagogical staff through immigrants from the near abroad. Scientific research here is concentrated on supporting those directions where world levels are maintained. Simultaneously, work is underway in the framework of the European Union on retraining military personnel. In 1994, the higher academic institutions of Russia accepted 20,000 foreign students on a tuition basis. At the same time, the system of education needs urgent aid. According to the State Duma's information, it was under-subsidized by 650 billion rubles. Stipends for students and postgraduate students doesn't exceed 50,000 rubles, and a revolution, the chairman of the committee hinted, is not a result of strikes but a result of student unrest. Closing the discussions, the chairman of the government proposed that the program be ratified completely for higher education, but certain points are still to be fine-tuned. So one must carefully approach the question of the amalgamation of higher academic institutions into one university and work out conditions to attract to Russian institutions students from the CIS and also define the necessary size of stipends and conditions for its receipt. There could be no egalitarianism here. As it has learned, at today's session of the government, a decision was adopted on priority liquidation of salary debts by the government to companies of the Russian defense sector. The Ministry of Finances should begin to pay the debt to the defense sector as of the 10th of April. The first Deputy Minister of Defense of Russia, Andrei Kokoshin, said that as of today, the government debt for the defense orders is around 900 billion rubles. The first major training in 3 years were held in the Northern Fleet. Involved in the current training are more than 40 surface ships, nuclear and diesel submarines and airplanes. The area of the training are the neutral waters of the Barents Sea. As we entered the area of the training, on the distant horizon, a so-called scientific research ship of Norway appeared, the Svergrund II, in actual fact a spy ship. Flying overhead not far from us is a Norwegian military Orion plane. Constantly on patrol are NATO nuclear submarines. Incidentally, our seamen located them, and all of this literally within a few miles from our territorial waters. To the command's request to abandon the zone of training, they react reluctantly, but yet they do leave, however not far. The training begins, our aviation appears, our large paratrooper ship, and we have incidentally only 2 in Russia, and other ships place radio and electronic smoke obstacles which make them invisible. The shooting begins. Entering the mission are rapid firing installations, ship artillery. Missile attacks are launched on simulated adversary ships. The volleys of fire and winged missiles hit their targets. To defeat them, ships open fire from anti-aircraft missiles, hurricane structures. The missiles are annihilated. By plan, the ships, submarines, aviation of the Northern Fleet should accomplish more than 400 combat exercises deploying missile, torpedo, and artillery weaponry. The training continues. The presence of the United States in the Central Asian region is a guarantee of stability. This was stated in Tashkent by the President of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov, at a meeting with the American Defense Secretary William Perry. The President of Uzbekistan expressed alarm over the growing superpower sentiments in Russia and the more constantly surfacing nostalgia for the old days of the Soviet Union. The U.S. announced that it takes on an obligation to not deploy nuclear weapons against non-nuclear nations, thereby, as is noted in the declaration of the President, Bill Clinton, the United States joins Russia, Great Britain and France, who had already provided analogous guarantees. Our government recognizes the legal need of non-nuclear nations to provide for their own security. This was stated in Washington to representatives of the Foreign Diplomatic Corps by the American Secretary of State Warren Christopher. According to the latest reports in the Filipino city Ipil, 45 people have died as a result of raid by Islamic terrorists. They seized around 50 hostages from among the Christians. State troops are arriving in Nepal. The president of the country, Ramos, ordered that the criminals be brought in alive or dead. Israel has launched into the Earth's atmosphere the spy satellite Afek-3. It's intended to gather information about Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia and other countries. The device of the space reconnaissance was created by Israeli specialists. Barricades on the streets, burning vehicles, broken storefront windows. This is how Athens' streets look today. Anarchists have reminded the city of their presence. Having been defeated in street clashes with police subdivisions, they retreated and barricaded themselves in the building of the local Polytechnical Institute. From there, they tossed rocks and Molotov gas cocktails at the police. 3 policemen were injured. Losses among the anarchists are being specified. The 6th of April is one of the most dramatic days in the history of the republics of the former and current Yugoslavia. Our personal correspondents in Belgrade report. In 1867, on this very day, the century-old Turkish mastery came to an end. On the 6th of April, 1941, Belgrade was attacked by German aviation. More than 3,600 tons of bombs turned the capital into rubble. The priceless National Library burned to the ground. On this terrible day, 2,500 lives were lost. On the 6th of April, 1992, the European community recognized the independence of Bosnia-Herzegovina. On this same day, in Sarajevo, the first victims fell, and so exactly 3 years ago, the Bosnian War began. 250,000 people have died during these 3 years. 80% of them were civilian residents. 1,600,000 have lost their homes and become refugees. One of the richest and most hospitable republics of the former Federation was destroyed in a way which was not destroyed even after the Second World War. In the Civil War, which has been underway for years, there are no culprits nor victims. It looks like an epidemic of an incurable disease. Incurable, because despite all the efforts of peacekeepers, there is no hope that this anniversary will be the last. In Bosnia, again, the truce has been severed. The mandate of the peacekeeping force is again extended. Fighting is underway even today in northeastern Bosnia, in the mountainous plateaus Majica and Vlasic. Assault continues of the 2nd Muslim Corps from Tuzla. The aim of the aggression is the strategic communications of the Serbs and the television radio broadcasting station in Majica. In the west of the republic, the Bosnian Serbs and the autonomous Muslims in response are shelling Bihać, a zone controlled by UN forces. The Muslim Premier Haris Siladic, in yesterday's interview to Monde, predicted that Bosnia may face 20 years more of war. Today, in connection with its for now 3-year anniversary in the main square of Belgrade, 6 Yugoslavian pacifist organizations gathered an anti-war demonstration. Now, a report from China. Our personal correspondents in Beijing tell us about attempts of Chinese scientists to incorporate the fantasy about dinosaurs from the Jurassic Park period into reality. It's no longer a secret when these giant bodies vanish from the face of the Earth, but why? And is it possible we'll encounter them again? Answers to these questions are given more by the world of cinema. What about science? The idea at the base of the famous American film, Jurassic Park, recently was indirectly confirmed in the work of Chinese researchers. In a science fiction film, to resurrect the ancient giants, genes were used taken from the blood of a mosquito. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, it bit an animal but was conserved in a drop of tar. The local scientists have found not a fictitious but a real gene of the former master of the planet. This was aided by the research of a recent find, dinosaur eggs from the central parts of China. They were well preserved and revealed much of interest about the Earth 70 to 80 million years ago. It turned out that the dinosaurs were ailing because of their diets. The eggshell contains traces of imbalance in their daily rations, and this evidently directly affected the survivability of descendants. The derivation of dinosaur genes again spurs the imagination. Will the museum exhibits come alive again? In the opinion of scientists, however, the find is only a brush with the mystery, because the human genetic code is still a mystery, and yet in Beijing one may meet the dinosaurs face-to-face even now, not just on the streets at a toy kiosk, but in their natural environment. The Beijing Paleontological Museum recreated a Mesozoic microclimate and settled in it the most vibrant specimens from dinosaurs, and instead of genes, computer chips helped breathe life into them. Konstantin Wybornov is prepared to tell you about today's events in the sports life. With this, I bid you farewell. All the best. Good evening. Today, with two semi-final matches in the Cup of Cups tournament, another trilogy of the European club tournaments in soccer comes to an end. Yesterday, the most tense semi-finals in the League of Champions were held. Fans who overflowed the stadiums of the Munich Olympiastadion and the Parisian Parc des Princes did not see the goals their team scored. Bavaria, with almost half of its team absent, tied 0-0 with Ajax, and Paris Saint-Germain lost to Milan 0-1. Protégés of Fabio Capelli conducted the match brilliantly, and at the 90th minute, Sonimir Bobin scored the decisive goal into Lamas Gates. Before the response matches, the chances of Milan and Ajax for the finals appear to be more favorable. The world champion, the Russian Anatoly Karpov, continues to lead confidently at the International Chess Super Tournament in the capital of the Kingdom of Monaco. In the seventh tournament, Karpov tied 1-1 in his micro match with his closest contender, the Indian player Anand. The world champion has now 10.5 points. Anand has 2 points fewer, and further 8 points each for the #1 contender for the world chess crown, the American Gato Kamsky, and the famous Hungarian Judith Polgar. To the end of the Super Tournament, 4 matches remain. The basketball players of the Moscow Dynamo, winning today in the 4th match against the Moscow Spartak team with a score of 92-72, have entered the semifinals in the playoff series of the Russian Championships, where they will meet with the Samara Army Air Force. I'll remind you the rival of the capital Army team will be the winner in the match, the rotor motorist Aquarius. At the men's tennis tournament in the Portuguese Estoril, the Ukrainian Andrei Medvedev is in the quarterfinals, beating Bogdan Ularach from the Czech Republic in 2 sets, 6-3, 7-6. Among the women in the United States, competition is underway. Seeded #1, the Spaniard Conchita Martinez easily beat Asa Carlsen from Sweden. Unfortunately, the Russian Yevgenia Manyukova is out of the running, who lost in 2 sets to Virginia Ruana Pascual from Spain. The Dane, Lars Mikkelsen, won the traditional Henk Wevelgem race, riding 217 kilometers in 4 hours 56 minutes exactly. With the same result, in second place was the ex-champion of the world, the Italian Maurizio Fondriest, and in third place, 5 seconds behind the leader, was the Belgian Luc Rosen. The Russian Dmitry Kondashev is in 12th place. In the first game for his new club, the Montreal Canadiens, the former New York Islanders defense player Vladimir Malakov made 2 successful passes, and the Montreal team beat one of the leaders of the regular NHL Championships, Quebec, 6-5. Note the victory also of Hartford visiting Pittsburgh. The score was 8-4. The Russian Legionnaires played marvelously, a hat trick for Chibirev and 1 more goal for Nikolitin. Good evening. Tomorrow is the Feast of the Annunciation. Spring has defeated winter. In the folk calendar, there are several signs connected with this holiday. Here are some of them. On the Annunciation, if the night is warm, that means spring is friendly. If it's windy and dewy and foggy, a good harvest. With the Annunciation, 40 mornings with frost remain. Now the weather for tomorrow. A cyclone with a center over Komi will define the weather in the Volga-Vyatsk area, the Nenetsk Autonomous District, and the Arkhangist area. It will be cloudy with some periods of precipitation, temperatures of +2 to 7. In Karelia and on the Kola Peninsula, also cloudy, but with some clear skies during the day, 0 +5. In the northwestern region, the Baltic countries and the Kaliningrad district, there will be the influence of another cyclone from the west and an atmospheric front connected with it. They're expecting cloudy skies, precipitation, and +2 to 7 degrees. That same warm atmospheric front will bring precipitation to Belarus and to the west of Ukraine, but here it's 2 to 4 degrees warmer. Over the central parts of Ukraine and Moldova, there will be the influence of a belt of high pressure which stretches from the southwest, because of which there is no precipitation expected, and temperatures of +5 to 10, in Moldova up to 17. A small cyclone just south of Kursk and an atmospheric front connected with it will ruin the weather in eastern Ukraine, the central and central Chernozem areas, and in the Rostov district it will be cloudy and rainy with temperatures of +2 to 7 degrees, along the Don +7 to 12. In a belt of high pressure over the central and lower Volga areas in the Stavropol and Krasnoyar Rim areas in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, variably cloudy skies, no precipitation. Only in the evening in the west of the Krasnodar Rim area there will be rain. During the day, +10 to 15. Over the central Volga, it's cooler by 2 to 3 degrees. On the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar coast, the Rim area will be cloudy, but no rain is expected, +11 to 16 degrees. It's dry and warm, +13 to 18 beyond the Caucasus. In Petersburg, variably cloudy skies, without much precipitation, temperatures at night -1 to 3, during the day +2 -2 to 4. In Moscow, same weather is expected, but windy. At night, -2 to 4, throughout the district down to -6, and during the day, +3 to 5. And to the end of the week, it seems the weather won't change. I wish you a pleasant evening. Goodbye.